So this week's episode of Faragon was definitely my favorite out of the 10 episodes. I felt like it was the most personal, the most emotional, with just the most substance out of all of the episodes. And it was nice just to see how the death of a fallen comrade actually had impact on these characters. But before we jump into that, I want to talk about Ray Dawn. He's a character who, from our perspective as well as Marley's, has been perceived as a bad person. But for me, after this episode, I'm starting to think that maybe Ray Dawn is one of the few in this military, in this government, that we might be able to trust. And my reasons for this is, from our perspective, because we've been focusing on Marley, our main character, it seems like he's responsible for the destruction of her town. So ultimately, that puts him in a very villainous spotlight. But out of everything that we've seen, especially who's been truly behind the theft of this fairy weapon, it wasn't Ray Dawn from what we can see. And based on the end of the episode, it actually seems like he's trying to prevent a war from happening and actually informing the Prime Minister of what's about to happen. To me, he actually seems like someone who probably did do bad things during this war, but what leader, what military general doesn't do things that they're going to eventually regret? Based on everything that we've really seen, he doesn't seem like someone who's actively trying to destroy a government, but one who's actually trying his best to protect it. And I think he definitely isn't without his sins, but based on everything that we've seen, it definitely feels to me as if Ray Dawn is actually going to be kind of displayed as a morally gray character who definitely has his regrets, who definitely disagrees with some of the justifications people have for hating him. But based on everything that we've actually started to see, of course, Marley has her distrust for him, but I actually think he might become one of the more interesting characters and one who isn't as rooted in evil as we first started thinking. And that's going to be very exciting. I mean, he definitely wasn't behind the theft of the weapon. He definitely is trying to inform the Prime Minister that bad shit is about to happen. To me, he seems like he might actually be a lot more noble than we're first giving him credit to, and I'm really excited to see more of this character. At first, I thought I wanted him to die, but now he's actually becoming one of my favorite characters to see on screen. That has me very excited for the future. So Oz did die last week, and what I like with this episode is how they didn't go the route of just 5 minutes and they're back to normal. They actually had to really deal with the comrade's death, and I expect if there really is a war brewing, there's going to be plenty of deaths, and we're not going to have any more episodes specifically like this, people mourning for an entire episode. But it's nice that before the first core wraps up and we have to wait for fall for the second core, that we actually got to witness pretty much everyone's sorrow in a different way. Marley is someone who, as we know, is this cursed child. Everywhere she goes, death follows her. And for a while, I've been actually speculating, is she actually cursed, or is it just her not understanding that death just naturally happens? Because we are in a world with fairies, it wouldn't be, completely left field to say that there actually was a curse inflicting her, causing death wherever she goes. But after this episode, it definitely feels to me as if she just didn't really have a proper family to teach her about death and how things just naturally happen. I mean, her family and village were burned down when she was very young, and everyone that she met, whether it be the hunter to anyone else, just ended up dead, either by natural illness or just unexpected just death and famine. And I think that's really interesting because a character who never had a proper family life, who never really was taught how death works, of course is naturally going to blame herself every time she sees death because she's going to naturally assume that her presence is what caused it. But as we see in this episode, she actually did have a mafia family, and I really like the idea of this group because they justify themselves because they technically run as a mafia just based on their family and how they are this big group, but because they don't technically do anything illegal, they can't be busted, and I really enjoyed that. It's such an awesome group, and he gets introduced as this grandfather. I was like, holy shit, Marley has a grandfather, and it's a really interesting dynamic because pretty much everyone in this group is either a sibling, either a child or a grandchild to him, and you actually get a real sense of family. The fact that she only stayed with them for 3 years because she feared that she would get them killed, it really goes to show how broken her mentality is. And once again, she was trying to leave Dorothea because she thought that she caused Oz's death. And I like how broken this episode felt. Right off the bat, you see a character who is just completely destroyed. The first failure for Dorothea, did I cause this? And you see everyone's reactions is a bit different. Free, someone who keeps surviving after surviving after surviving all of these battles and seeing comrade after comrade fall. Why can't I die? Why do they have to fall? Am I cursed? Things of that nature. You're seeing everyone handle the death differently, but for Marley, it was definitely the worst for her. And I really liked the idea that this episode was built around really building up her confidence that she isn't cursed and that she can go forward and say, if people do die around you, it's not your fault. It's no one's fault except the person who pulls the trigger. And if you're not pulling the trigger, you have nothing to blame yourself for. We would die for you and you would die for us. And I love how this grandpa is like trying to say, are you really able to protect her? Because he clearly cares for her, and if he thought Dorothea was bad for her, he would probably kill the entire organization to free Marley. And I like how Free really had to kind of put down his just coward behavior and say, like, you know, maybe I am a coward, but when it counts, I will protect her. And I love that kind of bond, because this is a very painful moment for them, because after just seeing what Oz did, seeing Free kind of get down on a knee and say, like, we will protect you, you will protect me, it's time to stop running away, you can't just join a group and then after someone dies you run away, this is the line of work we signed up for. It was a really nice confidence booster. I really just loved seeing the heartbreak in this episode, because, like I mentioned last week, the death wasn't for us. We didn't really know this character all too well. The death was for these characters who did know him for a long time, and for Marley, a girl who keeps blaming herself for all the death that surrounds her. And the way that this episode was structured, just really getting that heartbreak through, it actually was a really nice touch, because it made it feel like a death actually had importance, that this wasn't just a group of soldiers, that they were comrades, and they feel things. The fact that when Free goes drinking, he buys 2 drinks, one for him and one for Oz. The little details that really sell this as just feeling like, you know, when someone dies, it has meaning. Now, I expect when the war does kick off in the Second Corps, which I definitely think the war will kick off, I definitely think we'll see a lot of death. We'll see people similar to Oz get killed, and I don't think we'll see another episode quite like this, especially if we are going to be in the middle of a war. But it's good to see that these characters do feel, and it's a good way to develop Marley in a very interesting way. She's been bouncing from place after place after place. She didn't even stick with this group because she felt like she would get her grandfather killed. The fact that she was once again trying to run away, and the only reason she didn't this time was because Dorothea really proved that she has a place in this, that when she blames herself for the death of one of their comrades, they still come to her rescue saying, you can't run away, you have to face this with us. And the fact that her grandfather trusted enough in these people, I actually really like that. It just feels like Marley is such a cursed child, but not because she actually is bringing curse and death upon people, but because of her own mentality, her own worldview that was shaped at such a young age, and how it's been so impossible for her to actually escape that. And that's actually incredible development. Marley has started off as a character who is kind of plain and boring, but has actually become one of my favorite characters in this anime season just because of how complex her backstory is, but also with how complex her current worldview is, and actually feels like she's finally able to take a step in the right direction. Not only do you got all the Marley stuff, you got Ray Dawn, who's becoming one of the most fascinating characters in the show, who I thought would be the one to start a war, and now it seems like he's going to be the one to save the war based on that letter. It's really interesting just seeing all the political sabotage, but in the middle of all that, we actually get so much personality and just personal motivation that really sell this episode as being the best of the series. I also thought it was the best visually looking episode. Of course, there was no real action except a couple of swings with the new fairy weapon, but it was nice to see how they were framing the shots and just the overall body reactions. There was a lot of just subtle behaviors that naturally when someone dies around you, when you're feeling depressed and just on the edge of a cliff wanting to jump, it feels like the body reactions and just the overall body language, it felt like there was actually a sense of humanity, and there was these small details with how characters would kind of slunch over, or how they would just respond with the small quivers of their lips. It felt as if the team really wanted to sell this episode as being like, these are people you're watching. They just lost someone incredibly important to them, and they wanted to sell you as if you're watching actors, not an anime drawing, which was a really nice touch. I've complimented the soundtrack so much throughout this series, but this was the most emotional type of music that we've seen in Fairy Gaunt, and I felt like they really sold the emotion at hand. It felt so tragic, it felt so goddamn depressing, and I love how much of a range that this soundtrack does have. It can go completely metal and just have you rocking in your seat during an action sequence. It can be so ridiculous that it has you laughing at the absurdity, and then you can just witness such a depressing atmosphere play out. The fact that a majority of this episode was kind of shot in the rain, you'll have sequences where Marley won't basically give a salute to the fallen comrade because she is so broken, blaming herself. There are so many little details that you can pick up on that really just sell the current mindset, and then as you explore this episode and just see where it ultimately ends up, not only does it feel like we got such great development and character progression, we also have just a war starting to brew. And I think the Second Corps is going to be absolutely ridiculous when we do get into it. This is why I say Fairy Gaunt has such great payoff, and the fact that I knew that if you stuck with this show, even if you had a couple of issues, as long as there was something that caught your eye, be it a character or the political landscape, that it would have major payoff, and we're seeing that major payoff. Fairy Gaunt has truly developed into something special, and it's why it's my current hidden gem of the season. I think it's utterly fantastic. It's not without its faults, but just seeing where it's built up, it feels like there's been major payoff, and that all these smaller details that we first were kind of disposing as disposable elements are actually building up into something fantastic. And the fact that I can come out saying I'm excited to see Ray Dawn not get killed it really goes to show that this series has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. But I thought this was an utterly fantastic episode of Fairy Gone. Definitely one of my favorites. It was like a 9 out of 10 episode for me. That's how much I really enjoyed this episode. But for everyone who did watch, what did you think of the emotional touch? Where do you think Ray Dawn is going to go? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video though, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.